All right, please welcome the director of the film, Justin Simien, and Tessa Thompson, the star. Hey, guys.
What's up, Apple Store?
Hi.
This is awesome.
It's funny, it's like every element of sort of the world of this movie feels like it could just sort of like happen. Like when you're walking around, like I talk to you, I feel like I'm still like kind of talking to the movie.
Right.
You know, it's just like, it feels very much like you have a very distinctive voice, which is why it's such a striking first feature.
Thank you.
But it's also, I mean, in spite of the fact that it is satire, there are real life elements here. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit sort of, you know, what's the sort of real life foundation for this movie that you started with as you were putting it together?
I mean, for me, it started in college, and it started with the conversations that you have in college that are sort of funny, and you know, at the end of the day, kind of ruminating, and we were kind of having this conversation about what our Black experience was and how it was nowhere to be found in movies or television. You know, particularly in 2005 when I was graduating college. The Black experience in cinema was so foreign to me as a Black person. The conversations we were having were really about sort of, you know, being a Black person in a predominantly white space and sort of like toggling between our white friends and our Black friends and why are they separate and what happens when they come together and just having this different conversation, but also, you know, as a lover of film, kind of longing to have that new conversation in a way that had sort of gone out of vogue by that point. You know, we were sort of pining for the Do the Right Thing era and the School Days era and the Hollywood Shuffle era of cinema. And I kind of wanted to make a throwback that said something new. And that's really where it began. That's, you know, just out of that experience.
So Tessa, when you saw this screenplay, did you see some of that reflected in it?
Yeah, that was really clear to me that just it was really unique. I hadn't come across a script like that. And then I think the other thing, aside from just sort of thematically what the movie explores, Justin's voice was so apparent, kind of who he was, and I was excited by him coming onto the scene. And then when I saw the concept trailer that he made, I got a sense of what the movie would look like and feel like, and that was special. That sort of took it to another place.
Well, it's interesting because the movie takes into consideration the history of Black cinema, or at least sort of the modern history of Black cinema, and you directly reference a lot of stuff, including Do the Right Thing, but also Tyler Perry movies, and of course, Tessa, you've been in a Tyler Perry movie, so how did you feel about sort of that context being brought into it?
Well, you know, I was excited. I'll just say that. I mean, I think what the characters are talking about in Dear White People in the context of this film is that really that there is a hunger for a more varied portrayal of the Black experience and Black people in cinema, and that's what they're sort of aching for and griping about. And that's a thing that I have shared. It's not something that I think is the fault of any one filmmaker, and certainly not Tyler Perry. I think what he's been able to build is impressive. What becomes problematic is if people then say this is kind of all that makes sense, this is all we want to get behind. And I think that that's something that a filmmaker like Justin Simien was sort of struggling with trying to get this movie made. So I think you just need more filmmakers that come onto the scene and go, well, then I'm not going to wait for Hollywood. Then I'll just prove to Hollywood that there is a market for this film. And that's why I think what they were able to do with the concept trailer and then garnering an audience before the film even existed, that to me is sort of the new power of the internet. And that's exciting. So to be a part of that is incredible. But to be a part of For Colored Girls with that cast of women and telling that story, that when it came onto the scene in New York in the 70s, what that play did was incredible too. So no shade.
Dreams.
Well, since you mentioned the life of the movie, sort of the internet life of the movie before it existed, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, Justin, sort of how you're able to mobilize this community before it even existed.
Yeah, so before, you know, I mean, this is a script I've been working on for some years, and it really began to morph into being less of a college movie, in air quotes, and sort of, you know, using the college as a microcosm to talk about the larger American experience. And we were all really happy with the screenplay, by that time I had sort of, my inner circle of producers, Lena Waithe, Angel Lopez, Ann Lee, and we had a table read for the screenplay. And the conversation that we had at the end of that table read was just so powerful that we felt like the movie needed to get made. But I knew nobody in Hollywood was really looking for this particular kind of story. It didn't fit the sort of black movie paradigm, at that time. So I decided to just take my tax return, make a concept trailer as if it were a real movie. And the goal was like, let's make this trailer so good that by the end of it, when you're expecting coming soon, it says, nope, give us some money. And people got into that, man, and they gave us some money. They gave us about $50,000 in a 30-day period through an Indiegogo campaign, and the trailer went on to get 1 million views. And this movie that had no stars in it, it was really me and my friends and some actors we found, and this concept that no one was familiar with made sort of like became a part of the national conversation, and that was really the beginning of really kind of going around the gatekeepers and getting the movie made anyway.
Well, and you also sort of crowdsourced aspects of the screenplay, right? I mean, you sort of used Twitter to see if the jokes worked.
Yeah, like all of the deer. Once I decided that one of the things that happens in the film is that there's this radio show within the world of the film called Dear White People, and the controversy over whether or not that show is racist is really what begins sort of that's sort of the main thrust of the beginning of the film. And in order to give Samantha White, played by Tessa, all of these juicy, controversial lines, I started this Twitter account to test them out and to see, what people responded to, and the ones that got the most retweets and the ones that frankly got the most, butthurt comments. Those are the ones that made the movie.
And also, you said something recently that some of the butthurt comments, some of the counter arguments in the film, you also developed through some of the voices on Twitter.
Yeah, because some of them are frankly valid, and I wanted, I didn't want to have a sort of dogmatic movie that was, a morality play of like, this is definitively right and definitively wrong. But I did want to have a conversation. So for every point that's in the movie, there's a counterpoint, and some of those came from Twitter.
And did you guys have similar sort of conversations on set? Because, I mean, the character is sort of, your character, Tessa, is sort of in this identity crisis of sorts. She's sort of preaching to, one audience, but then she's got this white boyfriend and, a different kind of background and so forth. So there are all these different elements in play.
Yeah, I think every character, I mean, this is maybe just me defending Sam White, but I think every character in the movie is having an identity crisis of sorts, because to me, what some of the thrust of the film is saying that, we're not any one thing, that our identity is really fluid, and or our self, who we really are, is fluid, and that there's conflict when we project an identity or we're boxed into an identity by someone else, whether it's society or a parent in the case of someone like Troy. So in that sense, I feel like everyone in the film is kind of struggling with that. What was your question?
I think you're answering it. You're on the right track.
I'm just talking, and then I'll just see where I get. But what did you say?
Well, the real question is, do you relate to anything that this particular character is going for? I mean, it's one thing to defend her.
Oh, yeah, right. Anything that she's going through? Yeah, I think so, because I think more than any, she just likes really, being sharp and sort of cutting through and any one thing and getting a rise out of people. But to me, the thing that I really felt was an anchor for Sam and a source of her anger is she's really pissed off about how apathetic we can be as people, how we cannot want to look at the landscape around us and call a spade, call it like it is and call a spade a spade. I think that's her biggest issue, or at least that's the thing that I can anchor onto as far as her anger. And that doesn't have to do with white people, really. I mean, occasionally it does, of course, but but it's not limited to them, certainly. What were you want to say? Something?
I was just going to say, reference the letter that you wrote me.
Oh, what were you going to say about it?
I was just going to say, you wrote this letter that was, you were kind of drawing parallels between what the film was talking about and some of the things that were going on in your life. And that was kind of how I first met you, was through this letter that you sent.
Well, I wrote him this letter because the one thing that I really kind of understood was I grew up in Los Angeles, and And Los Angeles is obviously really a diverse place. The high school I went to was 4,000 kids, a public school in Santa Monica, and there was every, racial group, socioeconomic standing represented in the student body, but the school itself was really segregated. At lunch, people would sort of fit into these pockets, much like the world of Dear White People. You could really see where everyone existed, and like Lionel in this movie, the character in the movie who decided, or sort of like, who are my people? I kind of felt that way in high school, and instead of just like not really having a person and sitting alone at the lunch counter, I just freshman year, I was like, okay, I'm this kind of person, and it meant that I had to deny other things that I was to sort of fit in there, and so I understood what that was, that feeling of being like, oh, this is kind of phony, and I got that about Sam, and so in that way I felt like her character and her storyline was kind of a love letter to a previous part of myself, just to say, like, you can really reconcile all those things. You can be all the things that you are, and that's cool. And you'll find your people as soon as you can really be honest about what you are and what you like. Taylor Swift loving and all.
You love that new Taylor Swift song.
You know what? I haven't heard the new Taylor Swift song, but I really like State of Grace on the album Red.
Don't lie to
I
these
do.
people, Tessa.
So I'm talking about the energy of the movie just follows you guys around wherever you go. So, one of the things I actually think is interesting about that is, there's so much real world context going on here. Also, some of the plot of the movie, including things like, I believe there's a blackface subplot, so maybe you could talk a little bit about
That's
these
very
things.
ominous.
There's
a blackface subplot in this film.
It's a real commercial story.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, one of the things that the movie touches upon is this phenomenon at, institutions of higher learning, tending to be, predominantly white-attended institutions where groups of kids sort of throw parties, whether they're Halloween parties that are dubiously themed or, in honor of Black History Month or whatever. And it's like a coded way for kids to kind of show up in these really tired stereotypes, and oftentimes leads to blackface. And it's a phenomenon that's like currently going on in the country at, very prestigious schools and state schools and community colleges and all over the place. And we touch upon that a bit in the film.
So, were there themes that where it felt like you struck a nerve? Let's say when you started showing the movie around a little bit. I mean, is there any sort of way where you can go too far with this kind of storytelling?
I mean, for me, it was a matter of focus. I knew that the race politics was going to be in the world of the story, and sort of race consciousness is on the minds of the characters. But at the end of the day, at its core, I really see it as a movie about identity, and I wanted to comment on something that was, an aspect of the human condition. I wanted to do it with from a Black point of view, my point of view, but it's something that is universal. And kind of the proof that I accomplished that is when we screen the film and we talk to people who don't really look like the characters on the screen. They're not of the same race, or they didn't have that same exact experience, and they were able to connect. And for me, that's sort of what it's all about, as a storyteller, is being able to say something about the human condition, but to do so from a point of view that people aren't as familiar with.
So were there other kinds of research that you brought to the film in that sense? I mean, when you were writing it, were you thinking in terms of real people?
I mean, for me, it was really about telling the story that was in my heart to tell. I've had some experience with being Black.
Really? Huh?
Yeah, shocking. 31 years, in fact, I've lived as a Black man. And that, that went into the project. But also just sort of like commenting on...
You've done so much research for this film.
We commented on things that were happening in the real world. And I also it's a multi-protagonist story. There are a few different threads happening at once. And it's a very specific genre that in some ways has gone out of vogue, that, isn't as prevalent as perhaps it used to be. And there was a lot of research just in how those stories functioned and how those narratives came together. And so a lot of my research was about how to write the story, but I also did some reading. There's a book called Why Do the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? That was a profound influence on the film. Also Touré's Who's Afraid of Post-Black America? Just things that were sort of attempting to articulate, what the experience of being a person of color looks like now, as opposed to how it's sort of traditionally looked.
So we have some clips. You want to set up the first one for us here?
Yeah, what's the first one again? Oh, you can't sit here, I think is the first one, right? Okay, so this is sort of the first time that Samantha White meets what will eventually become her nemesis, which is a very sort of outspoken critic of her show, Dear White People, who is also a bit enamored with her, I'll say. And this is their first sort of public confrontation.
All right, let's take a look.
Doing things her way. The only way she knows how.
One of the things I really like about the movie is that the rhythm of the dialogue is just like so consistently satisfying. I mean, I felt like I was watching like one of those 30s or 40s screwball comedies, but with this, more contemporary context. So what was it like for you guys to kind of figure out how to get that flow going?
Well, for my part, it was a lot of giving the actors some references. There was a very specific style to the language that I wanted, and the movie that I showed folks was Network, which is, Sidney Lumet, Patty Chayefsky very written piece. Like, there's no doubt that a very intelligent man wrote every line of dialogue just so in that movie, but yet it's delivered with this sort of slice of life, this sense of, it just kind of came to occurred to them to say that in the moment. And it's also a satire, and it also is in a bit of a heightened reality, but it has a very specific performance style to it. And you did a lot of sort of thinking and pondering about Sam's delivery in general, right?
Yeah, I did a lot of that. I think also for someone like Sam, who is is a persona, frankly. So I did a lot of sort of looking at people that live in that space, pundits and people that have radio shows, and then just people that I was kind of like, how can I like sneak in the tone or cadence of this someone, or even if it's not that someone, just to sort of think about them and sit with them.
So who are you thinking about?
Well, there were the ones that were sort of obvious, like Angela Davis or Malcolm X. There was Huey from the Boondocks, which was something that you sort of was like, put that in there. And then there were other ones that, B. Arthur, which for every time I say that, people are confused. You don't get B. Arthur from what I'm doing?
I kind of get it. I've thought
Do you
about
get it now?
and I get it now. I told her she's got that very dry.
Yeah, she's
sort
like
of,
really kind of dry.
She waits for the right moment and then bam.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever. B. Arthur was really. B. Arthur is kind of always. Never mind.
We should all be thinking about B. Arthur more,
like,
I think,
as often as possible. So I thought.
And just all of our endeavors. That's the one takeaway, I think, of this movie.
B. Arthur.
If nothing else.
Not be yourself so much as be Arthur.
Well, on that note, you want to set up the next clip, the tip?
Yes, the tip test. So one of the things that is, and maybe it's just me, I agonize about it, but the stereotype that black people don't tip, it just totally messes me up. Because, like, even when the service is bad, like, I personally feel this pressure to, like, overcompensate for the stereotype. And then sometimes it's, like, cycles because I feel like the service is bad because they think I'm not going to tip. Therefore, I don't want to tip, but I got to tip because the next black person, it's sort of like this crazy, very black-specific, neuroses that I wanted to get into. And so Sam White has this book on campus called Ebony and Ivory, and it's sort of like this survival guide for black people on this white campus. And in this book is something called the tip test, where you can sort of figure out how black you are by how you respond to the situation I just described.
All right, let's take a look at the tip test. So it's. Did you guys have?
I love the people like delighted by iPads, like just like, oh yeah, I've been there. Sorry.
Well, that's why I was wondering. I mean, was it as fun to sort of shoot this movie as it is to watch? Because I mean, it's such a crowd pleaser.
It was fun in moments, not because like I don't love what I do, but the process of shooting a movie like this in the time frame that we had to shoot it with our budget. It was fun is a word I would use, but it was also very challenging. That scene, we were like looking for a location to shoot that scene. That scene moved around the schedule so many times, and then one day we were like in a building and we're like, is there like a cafeteria back there? Can we get some coffee? And we found like, oh my God, can we squeeze a tip test scene in here? I mean, it was because it was a fun scene, but it would have just like got cut if we didn't find a location to shoot it in. We didn't have the kind of money where we could like rent out like a diner for that 15-second scene. So,
And then the day that we shot it,
Oh my
a
God.
fire alarm went off.
That's right.
For like, we literally had a very short window of time, and then a fire alarm went. It was
For like 7 hours.
For like 7 hours. I mean, there were issues that there was a wig mishap. There was stuff. There's just stuff going on. Like, I'd love to do the pop-up companion, like the pop-up video companion to this movie, to like alert everybody to like what was happening.
Yeah, there were so
trivia.
many things happening when you make an independent movie.
A lot of things.
Sometimes, like, just off screen, like, chaos is ensuing, but
right in front
what's
of
in
us, it has
frame
to
looks
be funny.
absolutely orderly,
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine it must be hard to be funny at the end of like an 8-hour day or something, right? I mean,
I don't know. Sometimes being delirious makes you quite funny.
It makes you
Funnier.
loopy. There was a day that was so long that I don't remember directing like a solid 30 minutes of it. Like there was a gap between like 3 and 3:30 a.m. where we shot something and I didn't remember it. That's half true. The sleep deprivation part is very true.
so we got one more clip.
Oh, right. Okay. So this is, perhaps the crux of Samantha's argument. The question is, like, is her show Dear White People racist? And the dean of the school, who happens to be a black man, challenges her with that. And that's what this scene is about.
Let's do it. So yes, there are serious parts to the movie as well.
Yes.
It's done incredibly well for you. I mean, the last few months must have been a whirlwind. The Sundance premiere, and then playing at new directors, new films, which obviously says something about sort of the discovery of new talent and so forth. So it's one thing to have come up with the idea for a movie like this, but clearly you followed through on it. So talking before about kind of the problem of, maybe there aren't as many black filmmakers succeeding today as there should be and so forth. Has any of this sort of changed the way that you think about the situation?
I think that's sort of yet to be seen. I mean, the movie comes out this Friday, and that's really what matters, honestly, in terms of like change in the industry. I think my career has forever changed, and I'm so happy. I mean, this is the best case scenario, to be sitting in an Apple store in New York talking about this movie that was just like this random idea in 2006 that nobody was really looking for. So that's pretty incredible just on its own. But in terms of like changing the landscape of cinema, people got to show up and pay to see the movie. That has to happen, because in Hollywood, movies don't get made unless a movie just like it made money in the last year, and that is true. I mean, people don't sort of like fall in love with a screenplay anymore and just make it because they believe in it and pump a bunch of marketing behind it. That's not really the narrative anymore. So I'm very hopeful. I think the topics in the movie are in the zeitgeist enough for people to be ready for it. And the screenings we've had thus far have been really encouraging, but we'll know in a couple days, I think.
One step at a time. So I want to leave room for audience questions. Really quickly, Tessa, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, did working on this project change the sort of things that you want to do as an actor?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It really did. Yeah, in fact, yes, it did. It did. It really did. I've been having... Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, basically.
Her
Well,
answer is yes.
No, the thing is, I really like the word yes, and I think there's something about working in the it's just my favorite word, but there's also something about working in Hollywood that you are served up so many no's all the time that when you get a yes, you're sort of like yes, even if you don't necessarily feel that way sometimes, or you try to convince yourself that it's a yes instead of a no. And I think after Dear White People, that felt so incredibly like a yes to me from the moment I read it. I felt compelled to sort of wait until I felt that way. And then the next thing that came my way is this film called Selma, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. And so, yes, I'm in a space where it has changed my course, I think.
And Selma's opening next month, so you can even plug that here. 2 birds, 1 stone.
Oh, like plug it now or come back and plug it?
Well, maybe both.
Just trying to work a
2 months
Sundance
from now.
appearance. Just kidding.
Yeah, well,
Christmas Day, though. Selma's going to be amazing.
Minnie Driver's on next. I'll just stay and I'll be like, hey, Minnie, I got this movie.
Well, until then, audience questions.
I know, like, for me, I'm a freestyle spoken word poet, so I speak a lot on, like, political issues with racial tension. How is it for you with this film? Like, how much of a bigger deal is it for you to have create this, get it passed, and get it out, and then for you to even be in it and be featured and just have, like, such a dominant, strong character?
I mean, for me, it's sort of like above. It's like beyond me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because the things that had to line up for this film to even happen, and then for them to line up so that the film is like really released at a moment in our country where I feel like it fits perfectly into the conversation. Like, that's not something I could have in any way orchestrated. And along the way, there was lots of me being just really lazy and sort of like not writing, but things kind of happened in their own time. So part of it is just like I can't even take it in fully because like it's just so beyond, movies like this don't get made. They just don't. And that's not lost on me because I worked in the industry behind a desk before I started making films. And, I'm really, really grateful. And I'm really sort of just like on the edge of my seat like everybody else to see what happens when we open and how the film is embraced by the country. So for me, it's just really been just sort of taking in that this is a part of something that's bigger than me and bigger than us and, hoping that I've contributed to it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing for me. So many conversations have been had recently about, the face of television changing, that you can have a woman like Kerry Washington that's a lead on the show, and now Viola Davis or Nicole Beharie, who's on Sleepy Hollow, that there are these women of color now in leading roles, and it's sort of shifting the paradigm. And obviously Sam White and Tiana Paris, who plays Coco, to see these young women of color that are, really very unique portrayals, I think is incredible. And one of the things I said to Justin in the letter is that if I don't get to make this movie with you, I'm just so excited that you're here and that you're going to make this movie. And so I think it takes a lot more people like a Justin Simien to be like, hey, here's this kind of story. And I'm just, happy I got to get it.
Me
Get
too.
in there.
Me too, Tessa.
You mentioned that Hollywood Shuffle and Do the Right Thing and School Days were your influence for this film. So I wondered if you have been in contact with Spike Lee or Robert Townsend.
Mr. Spike Lee, I haven't heard from them. I haven't reached out to them. I'm afraid to meet my idols. You know what I'm saying? I'm afraid to show my little thing I did, so I don't know if it's gonna happen. I think when it happens, I did have the pleasure of being able to introduce She's Gotta Have It in L.A. for like a Spike Lee retrospective. I shook his hand and I sort of geeked out quietly in a corner. I sort of like I tried to contain myself, but we haven't had a conversation about this film. I have no idea if he's seen it. I hope he likes it.
Did I tell you I went to a luncheon right after we made the movie, and he was sitting 2 tables across from me, and I was going to march up because Do the Right Thing had such. Yes, I did march up.
You marched up. And
I marched up, and I was like.
You marched up and then you marched down.
Exactly that. But I
it.
really marched up with force. I was like, because I wanted to tell him what he, just what that film Do the Right Thing meant to me, and he'd be like, hey, I'm in this film that people like, and then I was like, no. So, anyways.
Good for you.
Yeah, I tried.
I'm proud of you.
Just curious, in the future, would you ever want to associate with Marvel or DC?
Is that for me?
Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm such a nerd, dude. I'm such a nerd. Like I watched, when I first realized I wanted to be a filmmaker, I feel like I was watching Batman the Animated Series. Like I swear I was like, I want to do that one day. So yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I love comic books. And I really, I'm a bit more of, I love both, so I'm not trying to make anybody mad. I'm a bit more of a Marvel guy though, because the hero is usually more of a sort of like underdog, marginalized person, which I can relate to for, maybe obvious reasons, I don't know. But yeah, I would live to do a superhero movie. It'd be so fun.
Same.
Okay.
Well, since we're talking about this particular movie, do you guys think that is it a little too vanilla?
Doing like a superhero movie?
No, are the superhero movies that are being made right now?
I mean, it depends on the story. I mean, on one hand of it, it's like when you're doing something that's straight up, like it's a commodity. Like this movie, low-key has to make $1 jillion opening weekend or else it will not get made. You do sort of have a responsibility, I think, as a filmmaker to the fourth quadrant of it all. That said, you know, there are some characters that really speak to me as a filmmaker. And if it felt right and it felt like we could do something really powerful, which I think you can do in that genre, particularly like science fiction, you know, the more science fiction ideas, I think it could be really cool, man. I'm not going to say which one I'm gunning for, but I've got some ideas.
You'll tell your agent.
Yeah, that's right.
Peace. Who else are you hyped about? Like, who else within your, you know, currently, that's also storytelling or...
Within the crew?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be film, but what other writers, directors, and so both of you that you're...
Well, I'm going to shout out to Ava DuVernay, who is going to, you know, Selma is going to be huge, which is like the Martin Luther King movie coming out at Christmas. And what I love about that movie is that it is a biopic. It sort of is, you know, in the world of the past and sort of our past struggles, but it's approaching it from like a really contemporary point of view. That's Ava's point of view, and she's really bringing something so special to that genre. And I'm a fan of hers. I can't wait to see it. I'm also a big fan of Baratunde Thurston, who's an author and a personality. He does take part live, but he wrote this book called How to Be Black, which is hilarious. I'm a big fan of Issa Rae, awkward black girl who really, you know, literally became a phenomenon on YouTube with her own show, producing content and helping other people produce their content. And I gotta shout out my best friend and producing partner on this, Lena Waithe, who, you know, also has, we did a pilot presentation on the internet together, and her work is phenomenal, and I cannot wait for audiences to discover, you know, her TV shows. They're coming soon.
Oh man, so many people I'm excited about. I really am excited about Dee Reese. She made this movie called Pariah that was at Sundance. She wrote and directed it. Such a beautiful film. Ava DuVernay is someone that I was really tracking, and so excited that I got to work with her. Along those lines, Bradford Young shot Selma. He also shot Pariah. He's a cinematographer that I think is just everything. I really love Miranda July. She writes books. She makes movies. She recently made an app for your mobile devices called Somebody. It's a messaging app. If you don't know about it, check it out.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
free.
I heard about
It's really
that.
cool. It's occasionally glitchy, but but that's cool too, actually. Yeah, those are some people I like.
Hi, guys. First of all, it's very inspiring to see two young people like yourself being on stage and having a movie like this that's making a lot of headway in the industry. And when I saw the trailer, it was really inspired, and I was excited to see it. Another thing, the tip, I can totally relate. I've been there, so I know where you're coming from. My question for you two are, any challenging moments on set? You know, like, is there something that you've done that you may have not wanted to do, or you've learned that you can carry into your next film? Because I'm sure you're going to get a next film.
Yeah, I mean, there were many, thank you for that question. There were many challenging moments on set. Just we didn't have the time, you know? I mean, truthfully, when you're doing a multi-protagonist story, one that's sort of like, you know, the intent is to make it look theatrical and to sort of like, you know, it's not like shaky documentary cinema verite style. It's very sort of presentational. You know, you want like a month and a half or more to prep a film like that. And you want like, you know, 30 days to shoot a film like that. You know, we had a couple weeks in 19 days. So there are compromises that you just sort of have to make in the moment. You can't really think about it, and you can't go back and shoot it again or shoot the scene. I mean, we were shedding scenes from the screenplay to get it done. And, you know, I regret that some of those scenes got lost, especially when you start to tour the film, and you're like, oh man, I really wish, now that I know how that scene plays, like I really wish we had that extra footage. And one of the things that, you know, and I guess it was just sort of the pessimist in me, I just assumed that once we sold the movie, the studio would want to cut it up. So in the back of my head, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get to go back in though. And Roadside was like, we love it, let's put it out as is. I was like, oh crap. So there's no budget for me to like add stormtroopers and do my George Lucas thing. There's no budget for that. So and also the movie was really working. But I think I'm the kind of guy who would always want to always be reworking and basing off of how it played, like working out different things, and also because our culture has really shifted since we locked the picture. A lot of things in the movie that are presented satirically are happening in everyday life, and they're making the news now. And I wish I could kind of comment on those things, but I can't. And but next time.
I had challenging moments, but frankly, none of them are that interesting. But Tiana Paris, who plays Coco, in the scene that did we see a scene? She in the trailer, she takes off a blonde wig, or she puts on a blonde wig. That was before the black face party, and she does an opposite thing. She puts on white face, or not white face, but
she just lightens her tone.
She lightens her tone a bit, and she has these blue contacts. And she spoke about how she kind of had a breakdown when she looked at herself in the mirror, and that was a really tough experience for her that night, because she realized that there are women that feel that way, that feel like the only way for them to be beautiful is to manipulate their skin color, or to mask their eyes, or to change their hair, and that's the way that they walk around and navigate the world every day. And that was just a really painful realization for her. So I know that was a difficult night for her.
Mm.
Hi. So as a writer, I just wanted to know, like, what is the writing process like? Like, when did you start writing this? What are some challenges that you face? When you were writing it, like, how did you make it inclusive but also not subjective?
Yeah. One thing I wanted it to be multi-protagonist. Like, there was just no way for me to make a movie that intended to have a conversation and not be dogmatic about this particular experience. In my head, like, I couldn't put it together as a single person narrative. It had to be multi-protagonist, and they really don't teach you, there's not an emphasis on teaching students how to write that in film school, because those spec scripts don't sell. Like I said, they're not really in vogue, and they're also really, really difficult to write, and they're kind of not that fun to read. They're very dense scripts, and you don't have a lot of time to set up the character, so it was just in all ways like a bad idea just from the outside looking in. So for me, it was, my research process was like finding the very few resources there were out there that applied to that specific style of narrative, and to like watch like everything in that style. And it wasn't just like black movies. It was, it was Do the Right Thing, but it was also Election, and it was Fame, and it was The Royal Tenenbaums, and it was Animal House. And I just sort of devoured those movies and tried to figure out how they worked. And I kept trying it. And a big part of my process is to table read. We table read the script. We opened it up for comments. And particularly because this movie does sort of touch a nerve, and it does, speak to some racial issues, whenever someone got set off by something, instead of closing off to it and taking it personally, I tried to incorporate it into the film, because the film really is about point counterpoint. It's about the conversation. It's about the back and forth. You, the audience, get to decide who is right. The film doesn't sort of make a dogmatic choice for you. And so it was important for me to sort of be open, to the feedback that was hard to hear and incorporate it into the narrative. And I just kind of kept doing that to the best of my ability until it was really time to shoot it, and I couldn't do it anymore.
So clearly, if people like what you're talking about here, and if they want to see and experience more, they can go see the movie this week and also tell their friends, right? So.
That's right. We, dearwhitepeoplemovie.com/tickets. Get them now.
You got to make that Marvel movie. So.
I want to make a Marvel movie, so please, if you want a black Spider-Man, okay?
Ooh, I want to play Spider-Man.
What's that? Huh? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just telling him he should do Pixar last night. I was like, you are so Pixar.
You didn't say that.
I said something like that. Remember, we had a Pixar conversation. Yes, we did. Don't lie.
We talked about it. I think you said it in your head. I love Pixar.
No, you
We're
said if you would ever have an office job again, you would do it at Pixar.
Totally.
After I said you were so right for Pixar.
You did say that.
This conversation will never resolve itself. Thank you for being here. And thanks to you
everybody.
guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.